Hello, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, doctor, we can hear you. We can
Okay.
see the screen.
Yes, good. We'll start in 1 minute. We'll wait for others to join coming. All right. Should we start? Ready? Okay. Before I'm going to start with the lecture, there are a few things that I would like to discuss with you. This weekend, I'm planning to release your assignment. So expect any email coming from me this coming Saturday or Friday. The submission time will be most probably by December. I am going to give you enough time to prepare for it. It will be an individual assignment. Okay. But for the meantime, I'm going to check the attendance. All right. I will start with Mohammed. You're here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. All right. Shall we have the attendance first before I'll proceed with the class? It'll take around 3 or 4 minutes. All right, Mohammed, you're here. Amna,
Yes,
Ibrahim,
yes,
Shada, Firdaus,
Yes, here.
Yes, yes,
Naim. Who is the other one? Shada here.
yes, I am here. Shut up.
Naima, Ahmed, Said,
Yes,
Aya,
Yes, I am here.
Khalid,
Yes.
Abdullah,
Yes.
Rawan, Muhammad Adnan,
yes,
Nawal,
Yes.
Noura, Jasem,
Yes.
Maryam, Said,
Yes.
Naim,
Yes.
Muhammad, May, Muhammad,
Yes. Yes.
Buzra, Salem,
Yes.
Aisha Saiban,
Yes.
Anfal Muhammad, Zainab Shambi, Fatma Salem,
Yes.
Kaula Muhammad, Fatma Muhammad,
Yes.
Jawahar Rashid,
yes,
Kaula Rashid,
yes,
Omnia Yosef,
Yes.
Heba Ahmed,
yes,
Hamda Said,
yes,
Budur Al Habsi,
Yes.
Maryam Muhammad, Sarah Sulaiman, Jawahar Ahmed, Mudi Abdullah,
Yes.
Nuf Hassan, Maryam Abdullah, Shaima Ibrahim, Asma Rashid,
yes,
Amna Ismail,
yes,
Nuf Humain.
yes.
Nuf, are you a sister of Mariam or Fatma? No. Third year. Fourth year now.
What?
You have any sister in the college? No.
Yes.
Fatma and Mariam, right?
No.
No. Okay. Reem, Ubaid, Alanud Abdullah,
Yes.
Aisha Ibrahim,
Yes.
Reem Nasser,
Yes.
Atari Hassan,
Yes.
Unud Ubaid, Rahma,
Yes.
Latifa Gulam,
Yes.
Shema Ahmed,
Yes.
Shema Abdul Rahman,
Yes.
Kaula Salem,
Yes.
Aisha Yakub,
Yes.
Malak Anis,
Yes.
Fatma Saud,
Yes.
Muhammad Jasem,
Yes.
Shaima Ahmed,
Yes.
Amna Ahmed, Khatija Rashid,
Yes.
Amani Muhammad, Arwa Yasem,
Yes.
Kaula Said,
Doctor, I'm here. I'm Ahmed.
Amna Ahmad, yes, okay.
Doctor, also me, Fatma Ahmed.
Yep, yeah, Fatma Ahmad, yeah. Shaika Abdul Rahman,
Yes.
Marwan Ali Said,
Yes.
right? Saina,
Yes, I'm here.
Shahat,
Yes.
Omar,
Yes.
Mariam,
Yes.
Naima,
Yes.
Fatma, Alrem, Musa,
Yes.
Suhaila, Safia,
Yes.
Sarah, Kamis.
Suhaila, yes. Yes.
Suhaila, you're here. Suhaila, yeah. Aya, Fausti,
Yes.
Mariam, Madi,
Mariam Mahdi is present, but she can't open the mic. She wrote in the
Aksa,
comments.
okay, Aksa Abdul Rasak. All right, last week, I think last
Doctor.
week, yes,
Doctor
Doctor.
39.
79,
Doctor
oh,
70.
70, Omar, yes,
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
79,
39.
Aya, 39,
Maryam
39,
Abdullah.
Mariam Abdullah, yes. Okay, so,
Doctor.
Doctor,
Doctor.
36.
yeah, I'll give you 1 minute, okay? What number?
13-6.
36.
Yeah.
Okay, Jawahar. Who else?
35.
Sarah
Yeah.
Sulaiman. All right.
Also 74.
74. Alrem. Okay.
63.
63. Amani.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Doctor, what about 28?
Doctor.
28. 28. Kaula. Yes,
Yeah.
Jake.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, doctor.
Doctor.
Yes.
Muhammad Saeed, the mic is not working. Is present.
What number?
First name Muhammad Saeed.
31 here, the
Muhammad
first name.
Said.
31. Yes,
Okay,
Muhammad Saeed.
1831. All right.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
So let's start now. Let's begin. Last week I introduced you already on the history of psychology, and we came to know first who founded psychology, particularly when he founded the first laboratory in Leipzig, Germany. Right, that was William Bond. Okay, psychology as a science was established in 1879. Right. Okay, and William Bond has a student. His name is Edward Kitchener. All right. He immigrated although in the United States during the time. So the concept of Edward Kitchener is a continuation of the concept that was proposed by William Bond. You see, the history of psychology is like linear. There are people who would like to continue the legacy of their teachers or professors And there were teachers, there were psychologists who would oppose giving rise to new ideas in psychology. That's how wonderful psychology is. If you propose something and you continue that, then you widen the knowledge. In psychology also, if you propose something and you contradict that, and you come out with another idea, then that will be a benefit also in psychology. The most famous contradiction is actually the work of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. You see, they went on opposite direction. Sigmund Freud, and at the same time with Erik Erikson, they went on opposite direction. They contradicted one another, but they remained friends. Although their ideas were not the same, were completely opposite. Likewise, in the case of William Bond and Edward Titchener, so William Bond looked into senses, five senses, and eventually Titchener continued that particular concept and he expounded that, leading to the proposal of his idea, school of thought as we know of, is structuralism. There must be some compartment in the brain that would have control specific sense. See, that's the reason why he called his concept as structuralism. No, he described the structures that compose the mind. Number one, there must be a space. There must be an area that produces sensation. And on the other hand, there must be an area that would have produced feelings, and there have been an area that would have produced thoughts. Okay? So specific structure would always control, interpret, receive information, and interpret that information in the brain. So his theory was accepted during that time. After all, it's the continuation of the work of William Bond, right? And of course, he was the first one who initiated this idea. This was the first established idea in psychology, right? And he called that particular idea, school of thought, as structuralism, right? That is one of the most fundamental concepts that he established. You know, if you're going to establish a science, definitely your idea would be followed. And during that time, his idea, together with the idea of his professor, William Bond, was revolutionary. Okay? Titchener presented the stimulus. How did he come up with structuralism? Very simple, no? Titchener presented the stimulus to his subjects and asked them to analyze its separate features. You know, this stimulus, it's a kind of experiment, no? In psychology, we have a branch that's called experimental psychology. You have to experiment on things, on perception, on people, on psychological phenomena. All right. So Titchener conducted a simple experiment. All right. He presented stimulus. You know the meaning of stimulus, right? These are either psychological or mechanical, right? These are the things that would originate something from the outside that will actually, let's say, stimulate the different senses. So the different subjects were asked to interpret that particular stimulation, right? And he analyzed the perception of his subjects, okay? Although there was no feasible way to check the accuracy of his subjects' observation, his methods were eventually abandoned, no? This is actually the problem in psychology, an early experiment in psychology. You see, you conduct an experiment, but sometimes it would be very biased because you have to prove something, no? So when he was experimented on that, there were so many variables that were not considered, that were considered and that were not considered. So there were conflicting results. Although he actually arrived on his specific idea, that was remained to be unproven, but at least, nevertheless, it was an idea, all right? That was carried over and that was believed by his followers, no? Here, researchers eventually became more interested in describing and analyzing the observable behaviors. You see, he was experimenting on senses. He was experimenting on the interpretation of the stimulus given to the subject. But particularly, of course, his particular experiment failed because of the biases and at the same time unconsidered variables that were controlling the subjects or the respondents. It was eventually abandoned, and researchers would have shifted to other area. So in that case, since this was the early area and era of psychology, it was also acceptable. See, they eventually shifted into observing and analyzing behavior because that is the thing that is tangible. That is the thing that would actually have would have to result into specific concepts that could be easily proven. So that's the reason why they would have associated the observable behavior with the mind, the observable behavior with the soul. So this was the question that the researchers and psychologists in the early period of psychology was asking. What is the relationship of the observable behavior with the mind? So eventually they abandoned the concept also of Edward Titchener. And here comes William James. Since most of the researchers and psychologists would not, let's say, cater the idea of Edward Titchener, they also believe somehow the idea of William James. William James, during the time, was a rising psychologist. No, he wrote the first textbook in psychology in 1890. Remember, psychology was 18 years old during that time. William Bond started psychology in 1872. Then you have the proposal of Edward Titchener. Then in 1890, William James came out with his book, The Principles of Psychology, right? He was more interested in how mind produces behavior. This time, psychologists observe behavior and would have associated that with the mind. William James, on the other hand, contextualized that, no? So he mentioned about how the mind would have produced behavior. You could always read the mind or predict the mind or interpret the mind by looking into the behavior of an individual rather than the structure, rather than the composition, leading to the establishment of the new school of thought, which we call right now as functionalism. From structuralism, there is already the assumption that a new school of thought is rising, which we call functionalism. So he rejected definitely the methods of William Bond. He rejected also the proposal of Titchener. So he went contradictory to them. He came out with his own approach to the interpretation of the mind through the observable behavior, which he called functionalism. What do we have here? How come that he proposed functionalism, right? So the perspective of William James is actually very, very different, okay? So here were the questions that he asked, no? He was, how does a person recall the answer to a question? He would have conducted an experiment, no? So these are some of the typical questions that were asked by functionalists. These people who were followers of functionalism. Okay, how would a person recall the answer to a question? You see, when there is a question, how are you going to recall the answer? How are you going to associate something that you have experienced before in relation to the question that's being asked? How does a person inhibit an undesirable impulse? How are you going to control undesirable behavior? Then, can a person attend a more than one task at a time? So apparently, in structuralism, you see, there could be an interpretation, one specific stimulus, one at a time. In functionalism, William James and his followers would already consider asking the multitasking. How would an individual do more than one task at a time? So during that time, of course, it was very difficult to understand, but questions like that would actually arise because they really were intrigued with how human beings would carry out so many activities in one sitting at a time. Yeah? Going forward, okay? Any questions so far? So that's the basic idea that we have in functionalism. The mind could actually dictate what could have in our observable behavior. How the mind is related to observable behavior. As I keep on telling you, the thing that you are thinking can always be translated in your behavior. So that's the reason why in the current times, at the present psychology, in order to understand people, we have to look into the observable behavior. Because as I said earlier, we cannot read the mind, but we can observe behavior. So we will always think, or we can always say that a person is like this because of our interpretation on the observable behaviors. See, we know that a person is actually sad when we are going to look at their face. You know that a person is actually happy when we are going to look and observe the behavior, their faces, their actions. You see, that's how functionalism actually arrived. And of course, there are other people that is that originated or that helped in the origin of psychology. We have also Charles Darwin. You know, Charles Darwin is not basically an evolutionary scientist. He's also attributed with the development of evolutionary psychology. You learn in your biology that Charles Darwin contextualized the evolution of man. Yeah, see, so Charles Darwin is also very important. His idea, particularly the idea that was brought by him, actually influenced so much of the psychological concepts that we have. He actually he wrote the book that he wrote his first book about tortoise. No, remember he actually joined expedition. So he observed the living creatures, particularly the tortoise in Galapagos Island, and he came out with idea, particularly the idea that is suited for psychology also, that said only the fittest will survive. In psychology, we have to do that also. No, we have that concept also. He came out with his book, which he called Origin of the Species by Means of Natural Selection. Actually, the complete title is On the Origin of the Species by Means of Natural Selection. It was published in 1859. And in 1871, he came out with another book, The Descent of Man, right? During this time, they consider basic features that are held common between man and animal because there is no point of comparison before. Now, Charles Darwin brought something since he studied animals, he was able to attribute the behaviors that he could have observed from animals to human beings. That's the reason why, because of this study, he gave rise to a new field of psychology, which we call comparative psychology. You see? So what do comparative psychologists do? They use the concepts, the perspectives from animals, the things that they view from animals, then compare that to human beings. One of the most famous comparative psychologists was actually Conrad Lorenz. Conrad Lorenz was a behaviorist who won the Nobel Prize also, no? Just because of his experiment with ducks. So there were a few comparative psychologists who actually did contribute a lot in science, no? So what would they do? What do these comparative psychologists do? They would always compare the attributes between animals and man. So that's why if you're a psychologist and you study animals in the laboratory, you would always be calling yourself as comparative psychologist. In other sciences, we do also about this. No, that's the reason why we have comparative anatomy. When we study the anatomy of other animals, like frogs, like cats, right, compared to human beings. So when you're going to understand and study anatomy, you have to do that. You have to study the different anatomy of other animals, no? So that you can compare the differences and similarities between two species. So likewise, in comparative psychology, there is a comparison between the behavior of different species, the man and the animals, right? Okay. So there are other concepts also that have contributed to the development of psychology in the early era, in its early era. No, comparative psychologists would have devised experiments that would have measured their intelligence. No, so that's the reason why they came out with the science. They came out with various experiments that would actually look into the behave, how would they behave in certain terms when they are actually placed in certain, let's say, situation. Okay, so do you remember the first experiment on dogs by Ivan Pavlov? No, I believe you could recall that the zebra experiment also, and we have this, no, the delayed response problem. These are some of the experiments that were conducted to that were done to animals, and eventually the conclusions that they got from this experiments in solving these problems were attributed or were found to be true to human beings. We have also the detour problem. We have also the pattern recognition that give rise to the new science, new field of psychology that was developed by Fritz Perls. No, and we will look into that as we go on. This is one of the experiments that we did. You see, rat, no? So definitely, when we are going to observe, behavior of human organisms, particularly living things, we cannot do directly to animals. There was one attempt. There was one attempt, actually, when they would have observed the behavior and conducted the experiment on human beings. No, it was partial success, but it was also a partial failure because at the middle of the experiment they stopped it. No, so I will tell you more about that as we go on. No, it was an experiment, the prison experiment, as they call it. No, so it was a failure halfway. They stopped. No, so eventually they would not want to conduct psychological experiment anymore to human beings. Instead, they would have done that all experiments to animals. So there's no difference after all, no? So that's the reason why some of the findings that they would actually arrive at when they would experiment with animals could always be compared and attributed to human beings. See? So the delayed response, this is the famous experiment that we have. Another experiment is the dog. This is the thing, no? The conditioned responses, the stimulus, and are you familiar with that more probably, no? The conditioned responses, no? Then we have the zebra experiment, right? The recognition of patterns. So these are some of the experiments that were actually done to animals, no? Anyway, moving forward, all right? On the early era and the rules of psychology, according to research, comparative psychologists, some species appear to be gifted in certain tasks and highly deficient in others. So definitely, these concepts were applied to certain aspects of psychology, like in the case of educational psychology and school psychology. If you cannot compare, and somehow the things that other animals can do, like for instance, you are not going to expect a turtle to climb a tree. You do not expect also that elephant can actually climb stairs. Anyway, certain species would actually be gifted and be good at doing things accordingly in some aspects, leading to the new concepts as we know today. You know, no human beings are the same. Maybe every person is actually different. The concept of multiple intelligence. So many concepts of psychology that were proposed in the early era of psychology were adopted and were actually expounded, and we believe in currently at the moment. Yeah. We have also the contribution of Francis Galton. Now, Francis Galton, he is also an anatomist, no? Francis Galton investigated how heredity influenced variations in cognitive abilities. No, so he actually looked into genetic problems in relation to the thinking capacity of an individual, the cognitive abilities of an individual. He found out, Francis Galton said, he found out that sons of famous and talented men were more likely to be accomplished and explained this as due to the influence of heredity. This is also some, this give rise to some problem already that we know, the nature nurture principle. So he gave this experiment, he actually gave this observation, but of course there was no definitive proof that would actually say that his observation was correct. Although his principle and his idea was actually received widely. So that was the basis of further experiment. You see, he mentioned that if the children of famous people would actually come out to be successful. No? So leading as of now to the question of either nature or either nurture principle. You see? So there is a problem here. Okay? That was the question that we derived at during this time. No? He tried to develop an intelligence test, but actually failed. So many people will try to were trying to contextualize, were trying to develop a specific psychological test, but of course, Francis Galton failed because he did not know really what were the possible areas of intelligence that a person may actually have. It's very difficult because you see, if you're going to look at the emotional intelligence that we have, originally, the researcher came out with 8. Now there is another 9. Maybe in the future there will be another aspect that would be 10, no? 11 or 12, we do not know, you see? So Francis Galton actually failed just because of that. He was not able to point out a specific area that he would like to measure, no? So he was not able to develop psychological tests that would be attributed to intelligence, no? And of course, his work was continued by another psychologist, Alfred Binet. No, Alfred Binet was the first successful person to develop a psychological test. No, so after working for the French government, he devised the first useful intelligence test in 1905. No, in order to identify children in public school system who might be in need of special services. No. You see, I believe, no, he came out with the idea because of a certain need. When you need something, maybe you are going to think of something creative. So Alfred Binet did that, no? They had a program on special services. There was funding, but they would not have known how to identify people with certain needs, no? A normal, of course, must be separated. People who would be deficient and people who would actually be gifted. No, so he was able to devise the first IQ test. No, his test was imported to the United States. Now, eventually, his test was adopted by United States Army. Okay, that would serve as a template to serve as a screening test for those who would be joining the army. No, okay. All right. So that's the first test of psychological of intelligence. No, Francis Galton started but failed. Alfred Binet was successful because of the need during the time in order to find out who are those people who would be needing help. Okay, in special cases. All right. So you see, so we have derived so many concepts right now, and we came to know about 2 different concepts already, or schools of thoughts that were prevalent during the time. The one that was devised by Titchener, and the one that was devised by William James. Titchener, structuralism; William James, functionalism. Here comes another school of thought, which we call behaviorism. This was founded by John Watson. Okay, and remember that. Now, John Watson. While structuralism was eventually abandoned, of course, no one continued that. It was discontinued immediately after William James proposed a new concept, a new idea, a new school of thought. So another concept was proposed in lieu of structuralism, indifferent to functionalism, that's behaviorism, no? This is the field of psychology that we know of today, which will concentrate on measurable behavior. Remember this is only a continuation of functionalism. In functionalism, William James was pointing into the connection between the observable behavior and the mind. Now, in behaviorism, it's more intense in a way because we are able to find the connection between the observable behavior, which we call it here as measurable behavior, to the mind. Okay? So here in behaviorism, we would always look into measurable behaviors, no? But devoid of the mental process. We have to observe the behavior of an individual, no? Here, the behaviorists would actually seek to study the observable behaviors that is usually associated to learning. Very specific, no? In behaviorism. That's why in educational psychology and school psychology, behaviorism is usually the thing and the field of psychology that influence a lot of educational techniques, no? So here comes the reward system, here comes the punishment, because we will look into how an individual learns. So that is actually the specific area that behaviorists would like to study. The association of observable behavior, measurable behavior with learning. Okay? So it's very simple, no? Moving forward, here is John Watson in 1913. He was the one who founded behaviorism. He mentioned that psychology, as the behaviorist views, it is a purely objective experimental branch of natural science. Now, here is the major concept. Its theoretical goal is the prediction and control of behavior. You predict and you control behavior. You are going to look into the measurable behavior in order to either predict and control. You see, his concept, his school of thought is widely associated in education and learning. Like, for instance, what are the measurable behaviors that we have? The result of examination, is it? When we are going to see the result of examination would be actually, let's say, good. You're given A. So what happens? You would be very happy. So you are rewarded with A. So that is actually exactly what John Watson was pointing out in 1913. Okay? Of course, other psychologists followed suit, no? Uh, Behaviorism actually would always look into this, no? Straightforward questions that's posed by early behaviorists have been replaced by complex questions in different aspects of behavior. You see, from very simple questions, then they would look into more complex ones so that they would look into complex reasoning of an individual already. No? From very simple questions, then to complex questions. All right, so that they would actually find out, they would like to find out if an individual can actually learn and can actually understand. Okay? Now, the modern behaviorists no longer hope to discover simple universal principles of behavior as we know, because there is no such thing like simple universal principle behavior. Yeah, remember the theory of everything, there should be unified theory, there should be unified aspect, there should be unified concept, but the modern behaviorists actually believe that it's not true. Every single individual has the capacity to learn. So an individual is different from another person. So there is no universality. There is no uniformity. So people are learning in different way. You see? So that's why behaviorism is very influential in the concept of learning. Okay? The principles of behaviorism are still useful to us, to modern psychologists, particularly also another practitioners, non-psychologists like the teachers. No? Come to think of it, if you are going to observe how teachers do and work in the school, particularly those who are dealing with children, what happens? You look into the desired behavior, isn't it? If an individual or student would deviate from the desired behavior, here comes already the reward and punishment. So in that case, you control undesirable behavior. Let's say if they were noisy in the class, what would the teacher do? Maybe they would do timeout. They would be initially excluded from the group, or maybe they are actually sent outside the classroom or a timeout room where the student or the pupil would be excluded from the class. In that case, you are actually doing behaviorism, applying the principles of behaviorism. You're applying punishment in order to control undesirable behavior. That's the very basic concept of behaviorism. Okay? So, any question about behaviorism? There are already three very important schools of thought that we know of. All right? You keep on repeating. Okay? Number one, we have structuralism that was proposed by the student of William Bond, Edward Titchener. Number two, totally opposed to structuralism, we call that as functionalism, proposed by William James. The third one is a continuation of the proposal of functionalism, William James, okay? Behaviorism. In 1913, it was proposed by John Watson, yeah? Which we call actually behaviorism. There is another star in psychology, which, everybody knows Sigmund Freud, no? There are so many books written about him. He's not even a psychologist, but his thoughts influenced the development of psychology. Now, his thoughts, his ideas actually qualify to be the fourth school of thought in psychology, which we call as psychoanalytic theory. Okay? Here, Sigmund Freud proposed the existence of the unconscious mind. Now, remember this. No? Structuralism was looking into the interpretation of stimulus, functionalism, the connection between observable behavior to mind, right? And structurally, and behaviorism was always looking into the connection of measurable behavior, okay, so that we can control undesirable behavior as such. And then here comes Sigmund Freud. There must be something that would influence our behavior that is actually connected with things unseen. And that is unconscious mind. No? Rooted in our animal origins. If you're going to look at the theory, this is something like true also. Because his contention is that there are behaviors that we display which are really similar to animals. In short, we are one with animals. No? If you're going to look at the structure of personality according to Sigmund Freud, we have the E. No? This is the structure of personality that would always have been associated with animalistic behavior, uncontrolled behavior that could have been dictated by the unconscious mind. It's there. The basic instinct of man, the basic instinct of survival. So it came and it's always associated with unconscious mind. Do you follow, class?
Yes.
All right, very good. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to ask questions. And if you would like to add something, feel free to add also. Okay?
Of
All right,
course.
now, much of psychoanalytic theory has been rejected. Of course, the theory of Sigmund Freud was very subjective, no? Just like the failure of other psychological concepts, most of the experiments were not very objective, no? So likewise, Sigmund Freud, his theory came out of his personal experiences that is devoid of objectivity. Most of the time, it was his subjective experience that would actually have given him to propose a new idea. Although his ideas are actually very good as of this time, because we utilize his idea in understanding the personality of an individual. We will actually study Sigmund Freud later on in our next topic, human development. We are also going to understand Sigmund Freud when we associate his theory with the theories of personality. That will be on the later part of our course, no? But anyway, I'm just actually giving you this because his school of thought is also the fourth school of thought that we know, which is actually very influential in the development of psychology, right? Most of his ideas actually uh, was proposed because he would like to help people who encountered psychological distress. After all, he is not a psychologist. After all, he is going to be or training to be psychiatrist, no? So he's a medical doctor in short. We'll know more about him as we go on. All right. Now the application. Let's look into before. Right now, we have understood the early era and the root of psychology. Now we'll look into the recent trends in psychology. You see, if you're going to read the American Psychological Association's publication, the Annals of Psychology also, psychologists, American psychology, if you're going to look at that, there are so many write-ups about anxiety in time of COVID-19, psychological problems in time of COVID-19. By the way, today is Suicide Prevention Day. There are also so many articles written about this. You see, every single day, as we experience various psychological phenomena, new trends in psychology would actually come out. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they started also the concept of transgender psychology. You see, transgender, are you familiar with that? Psychology of LGBT, lesbians, gay, and so on and so forth. No? And there are psychologists who are really devoting so much time to study this phenomena. Okay? So, psychology keeps on improving. Hmm? The basic thing is that psychology, even right now, is established science, so we accept. We should actually think that what they are doing are acceptable in the scientific community. So it must always be based on scientific principles. That's the reason why most of the concepts that we arrive at are always acceptable at this time. Although you may not agree, but at least their proposals would actually be deserving of merits also. Like in the case of understanding human behavior in terms of the preservation of our health. You see, smoking, that belongs to health psychology. See, this is actually very booming this time. Exercise, diet, these are behavioral science, behavioral aspects that would have contributed to the well-being of an individual that belongs to health psychology. Health psychology is one aspect of psychology that is encompassing so many areas of research. No, exercise belonging to health psychology, right? Then of course there is forensic psychology, as I mentioned to you earlier. This is actually belonging to the judicial system. It will actually deal with issues of mental competence for trial and the accuracy of eyewitness testimony. You see? So we have to look into that. No? There are so many concepts that are coming out and that are being followed, that are being proposed by psychologists. No? Any question, right? And of course, there is another psychology that is very familiar as of this time. This is psychology of feminism. Okay, it was first proposed by Calkins, Mary Calkins, the first woman psychologist. of course, Mary Calkins had so many controversies. In fact, when I was here, when I attended the conference in 2018 in Washington, D.C., actually, he was awarded his certificate, no? The his doctorate, her doctorate, I mean. Mary Calkins was never allowed to graduate, no, because during that time, psychology was always the belonging to male. So the psychological the psychological concepts were the area of male. So Mary Calkins was interested in psychology, so she enrolled in Harvard University. No, she did not receive her PhD, but she earned it. She completed it. The university did not award her PhD degree just because of that. No, all right. Although Mary Calkins was very influential in psychological work, so she became even a member of American Psychology, a psychological association. All right. In 2017, uh, the years of Mary Calkin received her certificate from the Harvard University, which she was awarded in simple ceremony during the conference in conducted or let's say by American Psychological Association or the EPA. This is Mary Calkins, no? All right. Do you follow? We can actually, right now I will stop here. So I will allow you to ask questions, or maybe I will allow you to contribute something. What do you know of? What are the things that you can actually contribute in the study of psychology? As nurses, what would you expect psychology to be? How psychology will influence your practice to be nurses? And what are the pressing psychological problems that we are actually encountering as of now? Maybe you will share so that your classmates may benefit also. I believe your class do have so many thinkers and intelligent students, so you can actually share. Anybody would like to share? What are some of the psychological phenomena that you would like to study during this time? Or what are the things that you observe in terms of psychological concepts? Or how will psychology influence your choices of course or your practice to be a nurse someday? Anybody? No one. By the way, I'm thinking about this now also because I would like to ask that in your question in your assignment. The influence of psychology in the nursing profession. No? What do you think? Is it very important? No? Psychology in the nursing profession?
Can I say something?
Sure. I'll appreciate that. Yeah.
I believe psychology can help us make important decisions. Like we can consider um, a lot of things, like for example, how do other people think, or human factors in general, or human nature. So it really influences us in taking very important decisions. You know,
Yeah.
yeah. And also, for example, since we are nurses and stuff like that, so it's going to help us actually understand patients, and it gives us the experience to know more about patients and, for example, go like deeper in their, for example, personalities, or in their, for example, mental, for example, disorders or stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, very good. I appreciate that. That's true, Ratma. You see, when you're going to encounter your patients, patients sometimes are unpredictable. We do not know how they would behave. No, and sometimes we do not even know how to react. So, in real situation, human nature will actually play. We are afraid. You see what's going on right now. Nurses are even afraid initially when COVID-19 was there 6 months ago,
Exactly.
isn't it?
Because nurses at the end of the day are educators and counselors. So, you know, they help in like advising, they help in understanding others.
Mhm. Yes, very good. No? Anyone else would like to share? Mariam, Aya, Khalid, Omar, Aisha?
Can I say?
Yeah, sure. Aya.
Okay, like as Rahma said, as nurses, we will understand more about. So, for example, if I understand about the patient I'm dealing with, I can predict, like, for example, if I have to give him any information or breaking sad news or something. So I can, by understanding his mind and the way he thinks, I can actually like predict what will be his, like how will the patient react to what I'm gonna say. So I will make my precautions, like for example I can get maybe the patient could be aggressive, or like, you know, I can make the room like empty from people. I can make him like just like prepare myself for like with a couple sentences that will make the patient to calm down. I can get assistance. I can take help from the patient's guardians or friends, who the people who are with the patient. So the psychology could help me like by predicting the and understanding the patient's mind and behavior and his personality. I can like be able to assist him when he's in that condition.
Very good.
Exactly. And this thing can make the healing process faster. So that's such a good advantage.
Yes. So I appreciate that you brought that healing pattern, healing aspect. You see, we are supposed to be there in order to help in the recovery of our patient. So the first thing that we are going to do is to understand them, isn't it? No. So that's one. Any other idea? You see, we have 4 more minutes, 3 or 4 more minutes. I would like to hear from you. Okay. Anyone? Anyway, okay. Expect my email this coming weekend. All the links also I'm going to give it to you. I believe you have downloaded already the book, but nevertheless, I'm going to make necessary arrangement in such a way that I am going to give you all the links that you need. The websites will be updated, and at the same time, in the LMS, you can find all the lectures, and most probably including the recording of this today's lecture. Okay, so I'll give you all the links, necessary links. Are there any other questions that you would like to ask? Any clarifications? If there are no clarifications, now for the record, I would like you to type present also, so that your attendance will be recorded also. Those who came late, no? Okay, please type present in the message board. Thank you so much. Have a nice
Excuse
day.
me, doctor.
Yes, my dear. Mariam.
Doctor, I want to ask you one question.
Yes, Mariam.
How we can study psychology? I mean, for exams, quizzes, how we can study? Because in slides there is no more information. It's contains only questions. So how can I study?
You have to attend the lecture and interact with us, because
Okay,
most of
so
most of the, most of the questions that I will ask will not be coming from the PowerPoint. After all, PowerPoint will not be the basis of our class. Our
so
interaction, just like what's going on right now. You understand? So it must be
you
very
mean
clear.
I have to attend the classes, so I have to
Yeah.
understand what you said, what you explained, right?
Yes, and you have to read the book also.
Okay, but
That's one.
still now we didn't receive the book, so
No,
because of
no,
this.
it's there. The book is in my. I will be sending you by tomorrow or by Saturday. The
Okay,
link where you can download the book. Okay.
okay, thank you, doctor.
All right. Have a nice day to all of you.
Thank you.
After writing present, you may leave the class already. Thank you
Okay.
so much and have a good day.
الكلاس خلص طلعوا الكلاس خلص.
هلا شيخاء.
صفوي سارة طلعوا. صف